have the booby traps. When pharaohs passed away, they were buried with all their belongings and a bunch of valuables. Because of this, they didn't want anyone raiding the tomb and disrupting the pharaoh's body. So basically, they designed booby traps / security systems. This includes rooms that led to nowhere and fake walls that robbers would break thinking that there would be valuables behind it, only to find nothing. The scary part though, they also had false floors that would break upon stepping on them, and then the person would fall down into a death pit. Basically, a hole with spikes and spears. Ouch. So researchers need to be very careful when exploring these ancient ruins. One wrong step and that could be it for them. Moving on, at number 9, we have the missing body. In 1934, Djoser, the first king of the 3rd dynasty of Egypt, was found. I mean, kind of. Only his mummified left foot was found. It was detached from the rest of his body. Dude, that's so creepy. Like, where is the rest of his body then? To this day, his mummy has never been found. It's believed that maybe grave robbers got to his body, but we don't know for sure. Hey, maybe he just wasn't a fan of his left foot and wanted to be buried separately from it. I'm just kidding, but that is creepy as heck. He's not the only mummy who's missing though. His chancellor that was buried with him has never been found either. Weird. In our 8th spot today, we have the toxins. Exploring ancient Egyptian tombs and pyramids can be very deadly. In fact, a number of deaths that may have been caused by the ancient Egyptian curse might just be from the scientists coming in contact with deadly pathogens. Like, they're entering a place that has been opened in thousands of years. These places are home to dead bodies and dead animals and rotting food. In fact, researchers discovered that some ancient mummies carried mold. This type of mold can cause congestion or bleeding in the lungs. Also, bacteria such as Pseudomonas and Staphylococcus may grow on the tomb walls. On top of that, scientists have also detected ammonia gas, formaldehyde, and hydrogen sulfide all inside sealed sarcophagi. Discovering this must have been a huge wake-up call to them. It just goes to show how dangerous their job really is. They're potentially being exposed to life-threatening toxins. Moving on, at number 7, we have the Valley of Mummies. In the mid-1990s, a team of archaeologists came across something pretty creepy. They unearthed 105 mummies all in the same vicinity. At least, originally, they thought it was just 105. In the end, they found hundreds more, but they believe that they haven't even found them all. They think there could be as many as 10,000 mummies out there. That is so creepy. Some of the mummies were even covered with creepy masks, others chest plates. Others, though, were just in plaster or linen coverings. In the end, they realized that the area was an ancient Egyptian graveyard. So that's great. They just dug up dead people and wonder why they get haunted or cursed. Like, come on, just let them rest in peace. Coming in at number 6, we have the canopic jars. As part of their burial process, Egyptians would place the internal organs of the dead into 4 jars before mummification. One jar had the person's lungs, the other the stomach, another had the intestines, and one for the liver. Why did they do this? Well, to preserve the organs, because it was thought that the person would need those organs in the afterlife. Now, imagine being the first archaeologist to find these jars. They're beautiful. The jar lids were carved with the heads of the 4 protectors. You had the baboon head, the jackal head, the falcon head, and the human head. So they were probably like, score, rare ancient Egyptian containers, whoa, until opening it up and finding dead parts inside. Sorry, but that must have reeked and then freaked them out. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the little coffins. Back in 1922, when Howard Carter and his team found King Tut's tomb, they also found something quite strange and unsettling. They found an undecorated wooden box in one of the burial chambers. Upon opening the box, they found 2 small infant-sized coffins in it. One coffin had the Osiris inscribed in it. The other had nothing. After opening the coffins, they found that they contained 2 mummified premature babies. Here's the creepy part. They were buried in King Tut's tomb, meaning they must have had some relation to him, meaning they were probably his kids. But one of the babies had some abnormalities and birth defects, and that these babies were ones he had with his sister. Isn't that just great? Coming in at number 4, we have the curses. Ancient Egyptian tombs and pyramids are filled with ancient curses. On a number of occasions, archaeologists have been exploring these ruins when they come across ancient curses inscribed on the walls. Let's take a look at a man named Zahi Hawass. He was on the team that excavated a tomb at the Pyramid of Giza. That's when he encountered a curse. When translated, the curse read, and I quote, "All people who enter this tomb who will make evil against this tomb and destroy it, may the crocodile be against them in water, and snakes against them on land. May the hippopotamus be against them in water, the scorpion on land." End quote. Now, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but you know it's creepy and that they're pretty much doomed. Anyways, he claims that he was not superstitious, but the curse did freak him out. In the end, he later moved 2 child mummies and reported he was haunted by them in his dreams. This did not stop until the mummy of the children's father was reunited with them. Not gonna lie, that's really freaking creepy. In our third spot today, we have the human sacrifice. During one excavation, archaeologists found several servants slaughtered and buried next to a pharaoh's tomb. Turns out that the Egyptians would sacrifice servants and other individuals when a pharaoh or person of power died. They did this because they thought that if they were buried alongside them, that they could continue serving them in the afterlife. Imagine how creepy it must have been unearthing all those dead bodies of people that were sacrificed. Extremely creepy. Moving on to number 2, we have King Tut's heart. So I think I know the reason why King Tut is mad and has released this curse on Earth. It's because his heart is freaking missing, okay? So like I said, all the vital organs were placed inside canopic jars. Now, the heart was very important to the Egyptians. The Egyptians thought that the heart was required for someone to get into afterlife. So it was always left in place, never removed. If it was accidentally removed, they made sure to always put it back in and sew it shut. But when King Tut's body was found, they discovered his heart was missing. Like, those things were preserved so they don't decay. So does that mean that somebody cut him open to steal his heart or what? Who really knows? But it is very creepy if you really think about it. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the mummified animals. So we all know that the Egyptians loved their cats. But did you know that the Egyptians used to brutally kill cats and other animals just to mummify them? Yeah. So apparently they had special farms that would breed cats, dogs, birds, reptiles, etc. These were then destined for mummification. So when someone died, they could bury them alongside these mummified animals. In fact, x-rays of some of these animals showed how gruesome their deaths were. How come we never learned about this in ancient history class? Like, that's dark.
A strange mummified body was found in a pyramid, and some say it's an alien. Ancient writers claimed Egypt once had a massive underground labyrinth with over 3,000 rooms, so complex it could rival the Great Pyramid, but where is it now? And just recently, ground-penetrating radar near the Great Pyramid revealed something strange underground, a mysterious L-shaped formation. These are more discoveries made inside the pyramids that could change history. A supposed alien mummy found inside an Egyptian pyramid. According to the article, the creature was discovered near Lahun in a pyramid tied to Pharaoh Sanerset II from the 12th dynasty. The thing was about 5 feet tall and supposedly over 2,000 years old. Now, the story came from anonymous sources. Someone from Egypt's Department of Antiquities apparently confirmed it, but also didn't want to be named. The researchers said the mummy didn't look human at all, though, with huge eye sockets, a narrow face, tiny mouth, almost like a reptilian alien. And near the body, they supposedly found inscriptions calling it Osirinet, which they said meant something like sent from the stars. Of course, a lot of people think this is just a hoax. I mean, nobody's really taken credit for this discovery, but if it was real, it wouldn't be the first time a weird-looking mummy turned up in Egypt. So legend goes, there's a massive underground labyrinth in Egypt that nobody can find. Ancient writers like Herodotus and Strabo swore it was real. They said it was located near the pyramid of Amenemhat III at a place called Hawara. According to Herodotus, this thing had over 3,000 rooms. 3,000! All connected through tunnels and chambers, and such a confusing layout that people would get lost inside. Herodotus claimed it was so impressive it rivaled the Great Pyramid itself. Statues, kings' tombs, decorated halls, it was all in there. Strabo also backed up the story, saying it was the most complex structure he'd ever seen in Egypt. But nobody knows where it is now. Some think earthquakes might have collapsed it, but whatever the reason, it seems to have just vanished from history. But if the place ever gets uncovered, it could be one of the biggest finds in ancient Egypt, no question. And speaking of, news of this just came out recently, and it could be a big deal. A group of researchers from Egypt and Japan used ground-penetrating radar to scan part of the Western Cemetery near the Great Pyramid. That radar works by bouncing waves into the ground and measuring what bounces back. Kind of like sonar, but for dirt. It helps build a 3D map of what's underground. Anyway, they picked up a patch of land that looked totally empty. No tombs, no visible structures, but something felt off. The ground density didn't match the rest of the area, and sure enough, radar picked up 2 underground structures, one shallow and one deeper. The shallow one is shaped like an L, about 33 by 49 feet, and just under 7 feet below the surface. The deeper one, around 30 feet down and a bit smaller. What really got them excited is that these shapes don't look natural. The lines were sharp, and the way they were laid out made it seem like they were built intentionally. Right now, they're still trying to figure out what exactly is down there, but if it turns out to be some kind of hidden complex, could lead to a bunch of new discoveries. Most of us have seen photos of the pyramids, but one guy got a view hardly anyone ever sees, from above. His name is Yanis Terzis, a paramotor pilot who flew over Egypt's most famous landmarks, including the Great Pyramid of Giza. And the footage is pretty insane. At one point he gets really close to the pyramid's tip, like foot almost touching it close. You can actually see symbols etched into the top. Yeah, it turns out there's writing up there. I had no idea. Most people stay high up during these flights for safety reasons, but Terzis wanted the shot, so he dipped low to get that amazing view. Near the Pyramid of Djoser, archaeologists found 24 giant black stone boxes carved out of solid Aswan granite, material so hard that even modern tools struggle with it. These things are massive too, each weighs over 100 tons, and they're shaped like coffins. What makes it even weirder is that some of them have smooth finishes and detailed hieroglyphs etched into the surface. That's incredibly hard to do even now, so how ancient builders managed it is anyone's guess. Some believe they were used as sarcophagi for sacred bulls, but if that's the case, it's odd how much effort went into making them look almost machine cut. The level of precision is really what throws people off. It just doesn't match what we expect from that time period. That's why some people think the Egyptians had access to, advanced technology that's been lost to time, or maybe never even came from here in the first place. For years, people have wondered how the ancient Egyptians moved these massive stone blocks to build the pyramids. One theory has always been that they floated them in on boats using a now lost part of the Nile River. Well, in 2024, researchers may have actually found it. A team from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington used satellite radar, old maps, and underground scanning technology to piece together evidence of a hidden river branch buried under desert and farmland. They're calling it the Aramat branch. Aramat means pyramids in Arabic, and it lines up almost perfectly where 31 pyramids were built thousands of years ago. The river probably got buried by sandstorms and droughts over time, which is why no one spotted it before. But back when the pyramids were going up, this waterway would have been right there, basically like a construction highway. According to the researchers, it would have made hauling those huge blocks way easier. They could just use the river's current instead of dragging stuff across the desert. In 2020, archaeologists hit the jackpot in Saqqara just south of Cairo, and they found 59 sealed sarcophagi buried in 3 vertical shafts. Most of them still had mummies inside, and they were over 2,600 years old. As for who was buried, there were priests and other high-ranking officials and elites from ancient Egypt. Egypt's antiquities minister at the time, Khalid El-Anani, even opened one of the coffins live in front of reporters. You can hear him in the footage saying it's completely sealed, hasn't been opened since it was buried. So that's over 2 millennia without anyone laying eyes on it. They also found 28 statuettes of Ptah, who is the god of craftsmen, and a bronze statue of the god Nefertim. That one had a name engraved on it, a priest called Badi Amun. So yeah, this is a big one. In March of 2025, researchers from Italy and Scotland announced they'd use satellite radar technology called synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, to detect what looked like a large underground complex deep under the Giza pyramids. According to them, this complex includes shafts, chambers, and spiral tunnels that could stretch over 2 kilometers long and go as deep as 2,100 feet underground. The team said it might be some kind of ancient subterranean city or network connected to the pyramids, but some experts, including Egyptologist Zahi Hawass, have strongly rejected this, saying that SAR technology isn't reliable enough to see through that much rock and sand that deep down. On top of that, the findings haven't been published in any scientific journals or gone through peer review, which means other scientists haven't been able to check to confirm the results. Radar experts have pointed out that the images might just be natural underground formations or errors caused by how radar signals behave underground. So because of this, most archaeologists consider the story to be unproven and even misleading, but I'd love to see a project get funded to actually dig down there and see what's going on. I mean, with all the mystery surrounding ancient Egypt, you really never know. The SciDep collaboration, SciDep standing for Science and Innovation for the Development and Exploration of the Pyramids, started a new project in 2025 to scan the Khafre pyramid using muon detectors. Muons are tiny particles from space that constantly hit Earth and can pass through stone, but they get blocked by more denser materials. By measuring how many muons get through different parts of the pyramid, scientists can create a kind of 3D X-ray image of what's inside without actually digging. They set up detectors inside the pyramid's burial chamber and outside around the base to get multiple views. This method builds on earlier muon scans done at the nearby Khufu pyramid, where a large unknown chamber called the Big Void was discovered. We covered that in part 1. The goal of the SciDep project is to find any other hidden chambers and tunnels inside Khafre. The project is ongoing, but it'll take time before the results are analyzed and shared. A research group using something called synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography, basically a type of advanced underground scanning technology, claims they found 8 massive shafts buried deep under the Khafre pyramid. Shafts that go down around 2,100 feet. Along with those, they said they picked up signs of 5 strange pillar-like formations shaped like the ancient Egyptian Djed symbol. The Djed is a sacred symbol in Egyptian mythology that looks like a column with a stack of rings or ribs near the top. It was associated with the god Osiris and symbolized strength, stability, and the idea of eternal life. Along with those, they found some cube-shaped chambers. There's a lot of doubt surrounding all of this, though. The radar they used can scan through ground pretty well, but detecting very specific structures that deep through thousands of feet of rock and sand is pushing the limits of what it can do, and on top of that, nobody's actually excavated the area to confirm anything, so for now, archaeologists are calling it a cool possibility. But without proof, this one sits in the maybe pile for now. We were always taught that only the rich and powerful were actually buried in pyramids, but a recent discovery may completely disprove that. And inscriptions hidden deep inside the Great Pyramid hint that it wasn't built by slaves, but by skilled workers who were honored like kings. And a giant unexplained void was discovered inside the pyramid. What's inside it? Find out. These are discoveries made inside the pyramids that could change history. So we were always taught that the pyramids were for the rich and powerful. Pharaohs, nobles, high status types, but a recent discovery at an ancient burial site called Tombos in northern Sudan is making researchers rethink that. They found people buried in small mud brick pyramids who didn't exactly live lives of luxury. Some of the skeletons showed signs of hard physical labor, things like wear and tear on the bones, while others looked like they belonged to people who barely lifted a finger. Tombos came under Egyptian control around 3,500 years ago, during the height of Egypt's power. Over the years, archaeologists have found at least 5 pyramid tombs at the site. The biggest one belonged to Stiuso, a pharaoh from the 21st dynasty. His tomb hasn't been fully excavated yet because it's too unstable. Still, researchers studied the skeletons buried in and around these pyramid tombs and noticed a pattern. Not everyone buried there lived the same kind of life. Some experts think the physically active people may have been servants, buried near their masters to continue serving them in the afterlife. If they're right, this could change a long-held belief that only the elites were buried in pyramids. A recent discovery inside the Great Pyramid of Giza might finally give us a clearer answer to the big question: who actually built it? For ages, people believed it was 100,000 slaves working around the clock for 20 years, but Dr. Zahi Hawass, one of Egypt's most well-known archaeologists, says the evidence points in a totally different direction. Using imaging technology to explore narrow chambers above the king's chamber, areas that are tough and dangerous to reach, Dr. Hawass and his team found inscriptions left by work crews over 4,000 years ago. And near the pyramid, they also found tombs of the workers themselves. These tombs weren't hidden away. They had statues of the laborers and showed signs that they were meant to last forever. As Hawass put it, if they had been slaves, they would never have been buried in the shadow of the pyramids. Slaves would not have prepared their tombs for eternity like kings and queens did. The team also found flint tools and pounding stones, plus evidence of a quarry just 1,000 feet away. Limestone was hauled in using a ramp. All of this paints a very different picture than we typically imagine. Instead of slaves, these were skilled workers who had proper tools, days off, and were even honored in death right next to the pyramid they helped build. Back in 2017, scientists found something strange hiding inside the Great Pyramid. A giant empty space sitting right above the Grand Gallery. It's now known as the Big Void, and it's huge, around 100 feet long. Nobody knew it was there, and to this day, no one really knows what it's for. It's not connected to any other chambers, and there's no clear way to get into it. The discovery came from the Scan Pyramids project, where a team used what's called cosmic ray detectors to scan the pyramid without actually having to go inside. The method picks up muons, which are tiny particles from space that pass through stone and help create a kind of 3D map of the inside. That's when they spotted this void. So far, no one's been allowed to drill or send anything in to check. It's just sitting there sealed off since the day the pyramid was built, over 4,500 years ago. It might not be, a secret treasure room, but also maybe it is. For nearly 200 years, a mysterious passageway inside the pyramid of Pharaoh Sahur sat untouched. First investigated in 1836 by British Egyptologist John Perring, the tunnel was buried in rubble, and no one was able to go any further. Perring believed it might lead to hidden storage rooms, but his theory was dismissed for decades, until 2019. A team led by Dr. Mohammed Ismail Khalid from Julius Maximilians University of Wurzburg started working inside the same pyramid. They hadn't been looking for hidden chambers or anything, they were just trying to stop the place from collapsing. But while clearing out the ruins, they ended up coming across that same passage Perring found all the way back in 1836. This time though, they kept digging. At the end of the passage, they found 8 storage rooms. They're in rough shape, parts of the ceilings and floors are missing, but you can still see original pieces of the walls. So, after nearly 2 centuries, Perring's hunch turned out to be right. In 2023, researchers found a hidden corridor inside the Great Pyramid completely by accident. It's about 30 feet long, 7 feet wide, and sits just behind the pyramid's north face, near the original entrance. What's weird is it doesn't lead anywhere. No connecting rooms, no decorations, it's just a sealed off tunnel. And once again, the team discovered it using a scanning method that basically works like an X-ray for stone. Dr. Zahi Hawass, who was part of the project, said the tunnel might have been built to take pressure off something nearby, maybe a hidden chamber that hasn't been found yet. There is something important under the corridor. We're going to continue our scanning, he said. One of the biggest mysteries around the pyramids has always been how the ancient Egyptians moved those massive stone blocks. They didn't have cranes, trucks, or wheels strong enough to carry all that weight, so how did they do it? Well, a recent study might have given us part of the answer. Researchers using satellite images found evidence of a long buried branch of the Nile River that used to run much closer to the Giza Plateau than it does today. It's now called the Ahrimat branch, Ahrimat meaning pyramids in Arabic. It may have been used to help move the blocks. The river was close enough that boats could have delivered materials almost directly to the construction sites. Over time, the branch dried up and got buried under sand, but back when the pyramids were being built, it would have worked like a supply highway. The theory is that ancient Egyptians floated limestone and granite blocks from the quarries downriver, then used ramps or sledges to move them the rest of the way. Here's more evidence for that theory. In 2013, archaeologists found something incredible inside a cave near the Red Sea. It was a stack of ancient documents written on papyrus, a type of paper made from a plant that grew along the Nile River. Ancient Egyptians used it to write everything from official records to personal notes. This stack was the oldest ever found in Egypt, and one of them was basically a work journal written by a man named Merer, who helped build the Great Pyramid, at least so he said. In the diary, Merer described how his team moved limestone blocks from a quarry to the pyramid site, loading the stone onto boats and sailing it along canals that connected to the Nile. "We transported the stone blocks from Tura to the Pyramid of Khufu," he wrote. This diary is the oldest known written record about the construction of the pyramid, and it's the first time we've ever seen something like this written by someone who was actually there. These are the words written by hand by a real guy working day by day at one of the 7 wonders of the world. That's pretty incredible. Recently, archaeologists working at Saqqara hit gold, well, in the form of ancient mud brick workshops. They found 2 underground embalming workshops, one for people and one for animals. There were also ancient beds, tools, and containers of resin used in mummification. It's all about 2,300 years old. The animal embalming area was found nearby, also full of pots, tools, and there were even animal remains. Archaeologists have been finding crazy stuff in Saqqara for years, but finding the actual places where mummification happened is pretty amazing. It shows just how organized and ritualized the process was, right there beside the pyramid complexes and necropolis. A few years ago, a team from Swansea and Leicester universities did something amazing. They unwrapped animal mummies, like a cat, a kestrel, and a snake. Now, this seems like a bad idea. I mean, how do you unwrap an ancient animal mummy without it just crumbling into dust? Well, they didn't actually physically unwrap them. They used super high-resolution CT scans to have a virtual look inside. The scans show a lot of detail, right down to tiny bones and tissues, much sharper than standard hospital scans. Professor Richard Johnston put it like this: using micro-CT, we can effectively carry out a post-mortem on these animals, more than 2,000 years after they died in ancient Egypt. He also explained how the scans showed how the animals died. The snake's spine was broken in a way that seemed like it was killed by bullwhipping, and the cat had likely been strangled. And they also managed to identify the bird as a kestrel and see dehydration in its bones. All this tells us not only how the animals were killed, but how they were raised and treated before they died. In 2024, a team of researchers using ground-penetrating radar claimed they'd found something strange underneath the Giza Plateau, like way underneath. Their radar images seemed to show what looked like rooms, tunnels, and massive pillars sitting hundreds of feet below the surface. Professor Corrado Malanga, one of the scientists, said it could be tied to ancient Egyptian myths, like the Chamber of Knowledge that was supposedly hidden beneath the pyramids. He told Italian media, until yesterday, Egyptologists said there was nothing, but there are a lot of things. The radar scans showed symmetrical shapes, corners, and what looked like passageways, none of which should be there, according to what we thought we knew about the area anyway. Now, to be clear, no one's actually dug down to check, and some experts are pretty skeptical, but whether there's really something down there, or this is just natural rock formations playing tricks on the radar, for a place we've studied for over a century, it's cool that we're still finding new questions and mysteries about it. Maybe even more than answers.
Human beings, especially in Africa, had achieved an insanely high level of sophistication. What they had done in Egypt is still, to this day, one of the most confusing things that anyone's ever been able to accomplish.
For the first time ever, scanning technology has been used on pyramids, and the results are quite surprising.
Watch what happened when this dude paraglided over the Great Pyramid of Giza. Find out about a hidden corridor recently discovered and a series of mysterious 100-ton boxes that archaeologists have been trying to make sense of. These are recent discoveries made inside Egypt's pyramids that left scientists fearful. This guy paraglided over the Egyptian pyramids. Take a look at this. Just earlier this month, a 35-year-old paramotor pilot named Yanis Terzis flew over some famous Egyptian landmarks, including the Great Pyramid of Giza and the Sphinx. It's incredibly breathtaking footage, and I am incredibly jealous of this man. At one point, he got up close enough to see the symbols etched onto the top. That is incredible. That's a part of the pyramids we never get to see. I didn't even know there was stuff written on the top until today. As Terzis stated, most of the paramotor pilots fly high for safety precautions. Sometimes I like to get a little bit risky on my flights and go close to the ground and over the building to get amazing shots and videos. And an amazing video he got. He also went on to say, on the pyramid flight, I had the intention of touching my foot tip over the pyramids. That was something unique that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life.
وأحب أن أؤكد أننا مستمرين في العمل.
That was Ahmed Issa, the Egyptian Minister of Tourism and Antiquities, talking about a discovery that had just been made in the Great Pyramid of Giza, a hidden corridor that had been sealed off for thousands of years. Using advanced scanning technology, researchers revealed a hidden corridor that measures about 9 meters long and 2 meters wide. This corridor is located on the northern side of the pyramid, just above the main entrance, and it's sealed off, meaning it can't be accessed from the outside. It's believed to date back about 4,500 years. The discovery was announced by Ahmed Issa and the famous Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass during a ceremony held at the pyramid. The Scan Pyramids project, which uses cutting-edge scanning methods to explore unexplored areas of the pyramids, was responsible for uncovering this chamber. Experts from France, Japan, Germany, and Canada collaborated on this project using 5 non-invasive techniques to analyze the structure without disturbing it. Still waiting for an update on this story. At this point, we still don't know what was actually hidden in the corridor, if anything, and we don't really know what it was used for, but they're still looking into it. Hopefully we'll get an update soon. Just back in May, a team of researchers from Japan and Egypt uncovered what they're calling an underground anomaly while studying the area beneath the Western Cemetery of the Giza Pyramid Complex. The Western Cemetery, which is located close to the Great Pyramid, contains a bunch of mastabas, which are rectangular tombs made of limestone or mud. But one section of the cemetery has been largely untouched, a flat area without any visible structures. Curious about what might be buried there, the research team used ground-penetrating radar and electrical resuscitivity tomography, or ERT, to scan the ground. And they noticed this odd density under the surface, as if something man-made had been buried below. The researchers identified 2 distinct underground structures, one shallow and one deep. The shallow structure is L-shaped, just under 2 meters deep. The deeper structure is even more mysterious. The team is seeking to excavate the site to find out what these structures are. Who knows what they'll find down there? All I know is I am impatiently waiting. The biggest mystery about the pyramids, and really one of the biggest mysteries in the world, is how they were built. There have been some interesting theories over the years, but just back in May, scientists made a huge breakthrough. A research team from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, thinks they've found clues to a long-lost branch of the River Nile, now buried beneath desert and farmland. A river that might have played a big role in transporting material for the pyramids. For years, archaeologists have suspected that the ancient Egyptians used a nearby waterway for transporting heavy stone blocks, but they didn't really know where this river could have been. To uncover the mystery, the research team combined radar, satellite imagery, historical maps, geophysical surveys, and sediment coring to create this detailed map of the river branch. The area is thought to have been buried by a major drought and sandstorms thousands of years ago. Radar technology allowed the researchers to penetrate the sand surface and produce images of hidden features, revealing buried rivers and ancient structures near where many pyramids are located. The river branch, dubbed the Aramat branch, Aramat meaning pyramids in Arabic, was found to border 31 pyramids built between 4,700 and 3,700 years ago. This means that the river was likely used to help transport material for the pyramids. Dr. Suzanne Onstein, a co-author of the study, stated that locating the actual river branch and having the data that shows there was a waterway that could be used for the transportation of heavier blocks, equipment, people, everything, really helps us explain pyramid construction. She went on to explain that the river would have allowed the ancient Egyptians to, quote, use the river's energy to carry these heavy blocks rather than human labor. Back in September of 2023, a bunch of hidden chambers were found in an ancient Egyptian pyramid. This pyramid, built around 4,400 years ago for Pharaoh Sahur, is located in the Abusir necropolis in northern Egypt. The pyramid has been undergoing restoration since 2019 to stabilize it and clean out its interiors. And as workers were clearing away debris from a collapsed corridor, they stumbled on these hidden chambers. The spaces were likely storage rooms, which might not sound as thrilling as finding a hidden treasure, but they're important for understanding how the pyramid was designed and used. The pyramid's tunnels have been blocked since its first excavation in 1836, and now, almost 2 centuries later, researchers had access to areas that have been hidden for ages. What you're looking at here is a massive 100-ton artifact, dubbed a black box, found in a cave system about 12 miles south of the Great Pyramid of Giza. This is just one of 24, and we still don't know exactly what these thousands-of-year-old boxes were built for. They're made of solid Aswan granite. Again, they're incredibly heavy, and it's not even clear how these things were carved and transported. The engineering is remarkable, too. These things are smooth as tabletops on the inside and outside. They also have hieroglyphics carved into them. Question has always been, though, how were these incredibly heavy slabs of stone transported from rock quarries to their current location? Just another unsolved mystery of ancient Egypt. Back in 2020, archaeologists made a huge find in a necropolis south of Cairo. They uncovered dozens of ancient coffins. Khalid El-Anani, Egypt's antiquities minister at the time, said that at least 59 sealed sarcophagi were discovered, most containing mummies, buried over 2,600 years ago in 3 wells. The discovery was announced at the iconic step pyramid of Djoser in Saqqara, where the coffins were displayed. At the event, one sarcophagus was opened in front of reporters. Saqqara is home to at least 11 pyramids and a number of tombs from different eras. And these recently found coffins belong to priests, top officials, and elites. Among the finds were 28 statues of Ptah and a bronze statue of the god Nefertim, inscribed with the name of its owner, a priest named Babi Amun. Alright, this next one's actually pretty entertaining. Just a little reminder that people never really change. Recent findings reveal that ancient Egyptians had a very unique way of tracking employee time off. A limestone tablet known as an ostrakon, housed in the British Museum and dating back to 1250 BCE, gives us a glimpse into the work-life balance of ancient Egyptians. This tablet lists 40 workers and details the days they missed, along with reasons given like illness and family duties. The absences are organized by season and date. For instance, on month 4, winter day 24, a worker named Pendub missed his shift because his mother wasn't feeling well and he had to take care of her. Of course, a lot of workers took off work because they were sick or injured. One name that's listed is Hainafer, who had eye troubles. There's also Seba, who was bitten by a scorpion. And another reason for not coming into work was brewing beer. This actually shows up a number of times. Beer was a staple drink in Egypt and was actually considered a meal. Anyway, just goes to show that people struggled with their work-life balance just like we do today. Although I don't think calling into work because you're brewing beer is gonna go over very well today. What you're looking at here is Pharaoh Khufu's sarcophagus. It may not look like much, but it's actually an incredibly impressive piece of engineering. It was made from a single piece of granite weighing about 3.75 tons. It's so large that it couldn't have been brought into the burial chamber after the pyramid was completed, so it had to have been placed there during the pyramid's construction. And what makes this sarcophagus even more impressive is that it was hollowed out from the inside, and it has holes that look like they were made with some kind of drill. So the question is, how did people in ancient times with what we think were primitive tools manage to create something like this? The effort and skill needed to make Khufu's coffin, like so many other constructions from ancient Egypt, just seems very ahead of its time. In 2015, something unusual was detected at the Great Pyramid using thermal cameras. Researchers found higher temperatures in 3 stones at the bottom of the pyramid. The Egyptian Antiquities Ministry had a few possible explanations for these heat spots. You figured they could be empty spaces within the pyramid, internal air currents, or just variations in the building materials that were used. Of course, there were also fun theories that the heat was being given off by ancient technology buried deep beneath the the pyramids, experts had been actively searching for hidden chambers in the pyramids. A team of architects and scientists from Egypt, France, Canada, and Japan conducted the thermal survey using sunrise and sunset. So they took advantage of the temperature changes as the sun heated the limestone and then allowed it to cool down. The ministry found that there were these thermal anomalies during their observations. One heat spot was found on the eastern side of the Great Pyramid. The stones there showed a distinct difference in temperature compared to others, hinting at something beneath the surface. This discovery was what eventually led to the Operation Scan Pyramids project, where they found that hidden corridor in the Pyramid of Giza that I mentioned earlier. A curse that says you'll end up eating your own body, a tomb that threatens to snap your neck like a bird, and a governor so spiteful he made sure your entire family would suffer eternally if you so much as touched his coffin. These are dark ancient curses hidden in pyramids. Alright, so let's talk about Pepi I, one of the pharaohs from Egypt's 6th dynasty. His pyramid is in Saqqara, and while it's not as flashy as some of the bigger ones like Giza, it's got one thing that makes it way more intimidating: a curse. Carved into the walls is this nasty warning to anyone thinking of messing with it. The inscription says the violator will lose their estate, be cursed, and literally eat their own body. Yes, that's the actual quote. And it doesn't stop there. The curse also name drops the gods Horus and Nephthys, calling on them to help bring ruin to the poor idiot who steps out of line. Now, this isn't some vague bad stuff will happen kind of warning, right? This one lays out a full destruction plan. You mess with Pepi's final resting place and you don't just get haunted, you get disowned, cursed, and of course, horrifyingly, you'll just eat yourself, apparently. Now, the reference to eating your own body, it's probably not meant to be taken that literally. It's more like you'll waste away so badly, it's like you're devouring yourself, but still, it's pretty dark. Next is the tomb of Kantika Ikeki in Saqqara, and this guy was not playing around either. His curse doesn't bother with subtlety at all, it goes straight for the neck, literally. The warning carved into the wall reads, "As for all men who shall enter this, my tomb impure, I shall seize his neck like a bird." So you show up impure, he's grabbing your throat and snapping it like a goose. Now, impure in ancient Egyptian terms could mean anything from not being ritually cleansed to showing up after doing something sketchy like stealing or lying. Saqqara is packed with tombs like this, and a lot of them have protective texts. According to archaeologists, the colorful hieroglyphs in these tombs weren't just for decoration. These were the ancient Egyptians' versions of security systems designed to scare off tomb robbers. If the gods didn't get you, the dead themselves would. Enktifi was a local governor during a pretty chaotic time in Egypt called the First Intermediate Period. He ruled a stretch of land along the Nile and was basically in charge of keeping order while the central government was falling apart. When he died, he was buried in a tomb at El Moala, and let's just say he was not playing around when it came to protecting it. He left behind a curse carved right into the wall, saying, "Any ruler who shall do evil or wickedness to this coffin, may Hemen not accept any goods he offers, and may his heir not inherit." What does that mean exactly? Well, basically, if you screw with his coffin, the god Hemen, which in ancient Egypt was like being spiritually blacklisted. And on top of that, your kids would lose the right to inherit anything from you. In ancient terms, getting on the god's bad side meant losing everything. And with no heir, your entire legacy would just vanish. So in their world, legacy was everything. Having your name live on through your kids and getting proper offerings in the afterlife meant peace for eternity. So Enktifi's curse made sure that anyone thinking of robbing him knew exactly what they'd lose. So this next one's from the tomb of a guy named Penuit, a high priest and royal scribe who served under Pharaoh Ramses VI during Egypt's 20th dynasty. His tomb was discovered in the ancient site of Aniba in Nubia, which was once part of Egypt's southern territory. Penuit's whole thing was being super loyal to the pharaoh, and apparently he expected the same kind of loyalty and respect after death too, because on his tomb he left behind this threat to anyone who dares mess with it. The curse says, "He shall be miserable and persecuted." Pretty self-explanatory, not very theatrical, but sometimes blunt is just the way to go. No birds getting their necks twisted this time, nothing divine or otherworldly, it's just human suffering. What's also interesting is how personal his tomb is. The inscriptions go on about how devoted he was to Pharaoh and to the Temple of Aniba. And there's this undertone of, I did everything right, so just don't screw with me. Right now, we're talking about Thutmose I, one of Egypt's earlier pharaohs of the 18th dynasty, the same line King Tut came from. He ruled around 1506 to 1493 BCE, and he was a big deal. Expanded Egypt's borders, built temples, basically helped set the stage for the empire's golden age. He was originally buried in KV-38 in the Valley of the Kings, but his daughter Hatshepsut later moved him to KV-20, probably to be near her own tomb. Anyway, carved into the walls of his burial site is a curse that also gets straight to the point. He shall have no heir. Again, this was a serious insult back then. Well, serious warning. Losing your bloodline, your legacy, that was worse than death in ancient Egypt. This wasn't just about stopping tomb robbers from grabbing his jewelry. It was a threat to wipe your family off the map for even thinking about disturbing. Egyptians believed strongly in the afterlife. Having no heir meant no one to perform the rituals you needed to make it to the other side. The Egyptians didn't just build pyramids, they also built these flat-roofed tombs called mastabas, and over 160 of them have been found at Saqqara alone. Some are pretty standard burial sites, but a few come with some pretty creepy warnings carved into the walls. These curses are meant to scare off tomb raiders and anyone who dared to enter without permission. According to one professor from the American University in Cairo, some of these inscriptions go after impure persons specifically, calling on the gods to deal with them harshly. And by harshly, we mean by having their neck wrung like a goose, for example. Pretty brutal. Next up, we gotta talk about the most famous tomb curse of them all, King Tut's. His tomb was discovered in the early 1920s in the Valley of the Kings, an ancient Egyptian burial site that goes back to around the 16th century BCE. The find was led by British archaeologist Howard Carter and financed by Lord George Carnarvon. It was a huge deal at the time. It got worldwide attention, but it didn't take long before whispers of a curse started floating around. The curse supposedly said that anyone who disturbed the tomb would die. And then, right on cue, basically, Lord Carnarvon died of BLOOD poisoning not long after stepping inside. And over the next few years, more people connected to the dig started dying suddenly. Arthur Mace, one of the excavators, died from arsenic poisoning in 1928. Richard Bethel, Carter's personal secretary, was found smothered in his bed. Douglas Reed, who helped x-ray the mummy, dropped dead not long after. Even though Howard Carter himself somehow dodged the curse for a while, he would eventually die of Hodgkin's lymphoma in 1939 at the age of 64. Coincidence? Probably. I mean, everybody dies at some point, but when you see that many people drop after messing with the same tomb, definitely does make you think. Let's dig into one of Egypt's grittier curses from a lesser-known pharaoh, Meribur Kheti, who ruled during the chaotic First Intermediate Period around 2160 BCE. Not much is known about him, but his tomb left behind this warning: "He shall be cooked together with the condemned." Pretty grim. A promise that if you mess with his tomb, you'll end up in the same fiery pot as the condemned. Conjures up some pretty classically hellish imagery, right? This one taps into that deep fear of disgrace in death, not just dying, but ending up dishonored and burned along with the worst of the worst. Back then, and to some degree still today, fire also meant total erasure. Here's a pretty unsettling one found in several Old Kingdom tombs. Cursed be those who disturb the rest of a pharaoh. Death by a disease no doctor can diagnose. Ancient Egyptians knew that disease was scary because it was mysterious and pretty much untreatable back then. So instead of mythical, otherworldly torment, they were talking about the very real terror of sudden, inexplicable illness. I think this is the one that creeps me out the most. I really like it because it hits on that body horror kind of level. It preys on that fear of medical helplessness. There's just no escape from your own decaying body, which is a horrifying thought. And true. Harkuf was an important guy during Egypt's 6th dynasty. He governed Upper Egypt and led major trading missions to Nubia. His tomb includes a warning for anyone thinking of messing with his final resting place. Carved into the tomb entrance, it says, "As for any man who shall enter into this tomb as his mortuary possession, I will seize him like a wild fowl. He shall be judged by the great God." Now that phrase might not sound all that intense compared to some of the other stuff we've heard on the list, but in ancient Egypt, being seized like a wild fowl and judged by the great god were serious threats. When Harkuf mentions the great god, he's probably talking about Osiris or Ra, meaning if you messed with his tomb, it wasn't just bad karma, you were basically asking for judgment from the gods themselves. What's cool about this one is also there's a mix of tones. There are inscriptions where he talks himself up earlier on, mentions the good he did, then flips straight into I'll grab you like a wild bird and let the gods sort you out, and it's not going to end well for you. A pyramid inside another pyramid was found in Mexico. Archaeologists also found Maya pyramids older than the Olmec ones, flipping the whole origin story of the Maya upside down, and north of Mexico City, a massive pyramid base turned up under a highway. These are more discoveries made inside the pyramids that could change history. So apparently the pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza in Mexico is basically the Mayan version of a Russian nesting doll. So archaeologists already knew there was one smaller pyramid inside the main one. That was found back in the 30s. But in 2016, a research team led by René Chavez at the National Autonomous University of Mexico used this cool scanning method called electrical resuscitivity tomography, basically a way to see through stone without having to dig anything up. And they found another, even smaller pyramid inside of that. So that makes 3 pyramids stacked inside each other. This inner pyramid might date all the way back to 600 to 800, which makes it the oldest one in the stack. Denise Argote from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History said it's, quote, more purely Mayan, meaning it wasn't influenced by other cultures like the outer one was. René Chavez also said the 3rd pyramid was a, quote, hypothesis in some archaeologists' minds until now. Everyone talks about how the Maya collapsed, but no one really talks about how they got started. That's where this place called Ciabal in Guatemala comes in. Archaeologist Takeshi Inomata from the University of Arizona led a dig there and found something surprising. He found a small pyramid and some big platform structures that are way older than anyone expected the Maya to be building stuff like that. The long platform they found is about 180 feet long and dates back to 1000 BCE. The smaller pyramid is from around 850 BCE. That's older than the famous Olmec pyramids at La Venta in Mexico. And that's kind of nuts, because everyone thought the Olmec taught the Maya how to build stuff like this. Turns out, it may not be the case. Inomata said that at the time these were built, quote, La Venta could not have been a large influential center, end quote. So basically, the Maya probably didn't learn how to make pyramids directly from the Olmec. Last year, while crews were working on a highway just north of Mexico City, they discovered a 1,375-year-old pyramid base. So not the full pyramid, unfortunately, just the foundation it was built on. Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History, or INAH, says these bases were the starting points for pyramids, usually with steps and stairs. In Mesoamerica, civilizations like the Maya, Aztecs, and Teotihuacan built these pyramids mostly for religious and ceremonial reasons. Experts think this base might be part of a kingdom called Metztitlan, which managed to stay independent from the Aztecs. The site has 5 sections and about 10 piles of ancient ruins, with artifacts dating from around 650 to 950. All the way up to the Aztec period between 1350 and 1519. Hector Labra Chavez, the tourism director for the nearby town, said before this, there were no known remnants of pre-Hispanic civilizations in this immediate area. So this find is a pretty big deal. Unfortunately though, they're gonna have to rebury the base after making 3D models because the president cut INAH's budget by 45%, so that means less money for digging and studying. In Campeche, Mexico, archaeologists were scanning the jungle with LiDAR. What they found is kind of wild. Buried under thick forest in a mostly unexplored area, they found the remains of a bunch of ancient Maya sites. One of them had a massive pyramid over 16 meters, or about 52 feet tall. There were also offerings like ceramic pots, a spearhead, and part of an animal leg, which were left on top of the pyramid. But the more unexpected part came when they looked under a nearby ball court. Turns out there is a structure underneath it that had been hidden for centuries. The ball court sits on top of this buried structure, which is rare and might date all the way back to 200 CE. Sprey had said the whole site probably stayed active long after most major Maya cities had collapsed, with small groups still coming back to leave offerings at the pyramid and keep old traditions alive. So this one sounds like something out of an Indiana Jones movie, but this actually happened last year, deep in the jungle of Guatemala. So archaeologists led by Francisco Estrada Belli discovered a Mayan tomb buried under a pyramid in a forgotten city called Chochquetem. It dates back to 350 CE, and according to Estrada Belli, finding it was, quote, akin to winning the lottery. So inside they found all kinds of ancient artifacts. There was pottery, a jade mask, plus carved human bones, femurs specifically, with Mayan writing on them. They also found shells which were used by Mayan elites both as jewelry and money. The mask is about 1700 years old, and the bones might help identify who this person actually was. Some of the writing even links a previously unknown king of this place to other major Maya cities like Tikal. Estrada Belli said, quote, tombs were accompanied by sumptuous offerings for the afterlife. In this case, the pottery would have contained food and drink, while the carved bones and jade mask were personal objects with special sacred meaning, end quote. The tomb was almost looted years ago. When the team scanned the area with LiDAR, they found tunnels dug by looters who'd stopped just a few feet short of the chamber. DNA tests on the bones are now underway, and all the finds will eventually go on display at Guatemala's National Museum. In 2024, archaeologists finally found the tomb of the first known king of the ancient Maya city of Caracol, Tikab Chak, which means tree branch, rain god. He took the throne in 331 CE and ruled what would go on to be one of the most powerful Maya cities. His tomb was dated to around 350 CE, and it was discovered in what's called the Northeast Acropolis, a pyramid that sat just outside the city where the royals lived and held ceremonies. This is the first royal tomb ever found at Caracol, and that's a big deal considering Diane and Arlen Chase from the University of Houston have been digging there for more than 40 years. Inside the tomb though, they found some jade beads, carved bones, seashells, and a death mask made of jade. Tikab Chak's remains show he was about 5'7" and had lost all his teeth by the time he died. According to Arlen Chase, quote, both central Mexico and the Maya area were clearly aware of each other's ritual practices, even though Teotihuacan was over 700 miles away. Back in late 2003, archaeologists Sergio Gomez Chavez and Julie Gazzola stumbled on something under the Temple of the Feathered Serpent in Teotihuacan. So after a big rainstorm, a sinkhole opened up near the base of the pyramid. Sergio got lowered down by rope to check it out and found a perfectly round shaft leading to an ancient tunnel sealed off by huge stones. In 2009, he finally got the go-ahead to excavate. They installed stairs, ladders, even an elevator, and removed about 1,000 tons of dirt by hand. I couldn't believe that when I read it. It's actually not that unusual in archaeology to dig stuff out with shovels and buckets when working in these tight, delicate spaces. The tunnel under the Temple of the Feathered Serpent is narrow, it's got a low ceiling, and it's full of fragile artifacts, so they couldn't just roll in machinery without risking damage. Inside though, they found all kinds of stuff: giant spiral seashells, jaguar bones, carved wooden masks covered in jade and quartz, necklaces, crocodile teeth, and over 400 shiny spheres made of clay and coated in pyrite, which is often referred to as fool's gold. At the end of the tunnel, they found a ritual chamber meant to represent the underworld. It had a mini mountain landscape with tiny pools of liquid mercury standing in for lakes. There was a rubber ball, which was probably meant to symbolize the sun, and there were 4 statues with crystal eyes placed there, 2 of them still in their original positions, leaning back and staring upward. Alright, this weird little object might not look like much at first glance, but it's actually one of the strangest things ever found in ancient Egypt. It's called the Sabu disc, and it was discovered in 1936 by archaeologist Walter Brian Emery inside a tomb at Saqqara. The tomb belonged to a guy named Sabu, an official who lived around 3000 to 2800 BCE. The thing is carved from a type of tough stone called schist, which already makes it impressive because this stuff is hard to shape even with modern tools. Oddly though, doesn't this thing kinda look like a broken piece of a machine, almost like a fan blade? Nobody really knows what this thing was for though. Some archaeologists think it might have been purely decorative or ceremonial since it was, buried in a tomb, but others think It could have been part of some sort of machine. As for what that thing would have been though, we have no idea. So in Egypt's Dendera temple, there's this one relief carved into a wall that's been driving people nuts for years. So it shows a snake coming out of a lotus flower. The whole thing is being held up by an Egyptian squatting on a pillar, but if you're looking at it with modern eyes, which all of us are, we all have modern eyes, well, it really does look like a giant light bulb, doesn't it? It looks almost exactly like a Crookes tube, which was an early version of the light bulb invented in the 1800s. There's more though. That specific room in the temple, the one with this carving, has no burn marks, no soot, no lamp residue. But everywhere else in the temple, archaeologists have found evidence that fire was used to light things up, stuff like soot deposits on the ceiling. So the question is, how did they light this room if they weren't using regular fire lamps? And why would they carve something so detailed in a room that's pitch black? How could they have done that? Especially carving something that just happens to look like a light bulb. Did they have another way of lighting up this room? Who knows? All right, you're not gonna believe this one. In 2015, a regular dude in Egypt named Dagi lived in a village called Harania, which is super close to the Giza Plateau where the Great Pyramid of Khufu is. So this guy, he's just digging in his own backyard, no permits, when 33 feet down, boom, he hits a tunnel. It was made of ancient stone blocks, and where did it lead? Well, only to the Great Pyramid of Khufu, of course. This is absolutely insane, because archaeologists have been looking for hidden passages like this for decades. Some even thought they didn't exist. But this exact passage was written about by the ancient Greek historian Herodotus. He said that when he visited Egypt back in the 5th century BCE, he was led through a tunnel to see the pyramid. Most people thought that was just a story until this local guy finds it under his freaking house. Amazing.